So this is a very challenging conversation, and I really appreciate the way that one of our public commenters framed their support for re-inclusion of school resource officers at the beginning of our meeting tonight. And I believe the word that she used is cautious. I cautiously support the re-inclusion of school resource officers in the school district. For those of you that have been tuned into this conversation in a while, you'll recognize that that is a change in position for me. When the school district was sat down in the midst of the COVID shutdown and examined our school resource memorandum of understanding with the Olympia Police Department, a couple things became clear very quickly. First, that the existing memorandum of understanding was wildly out of compliance with the newly passed state law, and that we had a shutdown. There was nobody on campus for anybody to patrol. And we had, by statute, until school year 2021-2022, to pass a new policy that was in compliance with RCW 28A320. And we've been engaged in that conversation ever since. And so there's a few different pieces to that from my perspective that we need to talk about as a community. First, we've been having a long conversation about this. The board, you as a community, faculty, students, and staff. So I don't think that there's been any shortage of public comment per se or discernment on behalf of our community when it comes to thinking about whether or not SROs belong back on our campuses, and if so, under what circumstances. And for me, I find all of the data still, to this moment, very compelling that there is no positive correlation between the presence of a school resource officer and stopping mass shootings at schools. And we know that there is a history, an unfortunate, sad history of biased policing that gives, as folks here tonight have observed, students of color as well as disabled people pause when they're around a law enforcement officer, whether we want it to be that way or not. That's the reality that we live in. That's a fact. And it's a fact that that has documented, researched, negative implications for the mental health of folks. Schools are for learning. It's hard to learn when you're being policed. And it's even harder to learn when there are firearms present at school and you don't have law enforcement officers readily available to help enforce the law. And that's why I'm here, supporting passage of this policy and the reinitiation of our SRO memorandum of understanding with the city. It's that the unfortunate reality is that the law is being broken in a way that endangers public safety on our campuses. That's a threat to student livelihood, that's a threat to staff livelihood. And as one of our public commenters correctly pointed out, the problem at some fundamental level is that our building administrators do not have in their assigned duties surrounding students in possession of a firearm and risking their lives until the police arrive on campus. And even though in this situation, it took all of 3 minutes for them to arrive and be present, that was 120 to 150 seconds too long. And the fact that all of us in our community have sat around scratching our heads wondering, like, how many butterflies had to flap their wings for that gun to come out and for a student or a member of the staff to lose their life or experience serious harm or injury. And so for me, it comes down to weighing relative harms. And I understand that that kind of utilitarian thinking isn't the thing that folks want to hear, or frankly have come to expect to hear from me. But it's where I am. And so much of this is personal. It can't help but be personal. I've experienced gun violence in my life. I lost one of my closest friends to suicide in high school with a firearm. And don't get it twisted. It's not fair for us as a group of leaders, us as an administration, us as a group of students, us as a community, to expect an SRO to solve these problems, right? Our schools are just a reflection of our community, a little microcosm, right? That principal is the mayor of a small town. And the fact that we have students that are able to get a firearm to bring to school, that's a problem. And while I don't think it's any surprise at this point that there's all this gossip going on in the community about who this student was and why they had a firearm, I think that that's a conversation all of us could be having with the state legislature about what are they doing to advance gun control in this state when there are very clear red flags warnings that should have stopped somebody in this person's shoes from having access to a firearm in the first place. And we can't wait for those upstream advocacy solutions to stop firearms from being on our campuses. We're missing a last line of defense right now. I think the other thing that I find very compelling and important for all of us to understand is that the mental health supports that many of us are calling for and have advocated for, I'll dare anybody in this room or on Zoom to identify a school district south of Tacoma that spends more money on a per capita basis on social emotional learning and mental health in our schools. And I can dare you that because there isn't one. We're making those investments. They're not perfect, and they're not as universally available as they need to be, because we should be living in a world where all of our staff, all of our families, all of our students have the kind of trauma-informed training and education that we don't have to worry about a world where a student thinks it's a good idea to bring a firearm to school. And that's not stopping problems in the meantime. So, I reluctantly support this. I cautiously support this. As the public commenter mentioned, the only way that having an SRO on our campuses enhances security is if we're doing all the work outside of campus to make sure that people feel compassionate and kind treatment by their fellow citizens, students, educators, so that they never contemplate bringing a gun to school. And we need an SRO on campus because if it happens, I'm not willing on an ongoing basis to place the unfair burden of policing that behavior on our administrative staff, educators and paraeducators, food service staff and technology workers that didn't sign up for that.